Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment when your phone lights up with his name, and before you even breathe, your heart leaps and your mind whispers, maybe this time is different. But what if I told you that the biggest danger isn't his message, it's the part of you that forgets everything you learned the moment he reappears? What if the real test isn't whether he's changed, but whether you have? Stay with me, because the next few moments might save you from repeating the same painful cycle and remind you of the power you've had inside you all along. When your phone lights up with his name after days, weeks, or even months of silence, there's a moment where everything inside you reacts before your mind even catches up. Your stomach flips, your heart pauses, your thoughts race, and in that split second, your instincts speak first. They whisper the truth long before your logic begins negotiating with it. But for so many women, that instinct gets ignored the moment hope shows up wearing his name on their screen. There is a mistake that happens far too often in that moment. Instead of trusting that first feeling, whether it's caution, hesitation, or a quiet internal be careful, you override it. You respond from emotion instead of clarity. You lean into fantasy instead of fact. You let the excitement of being noticed overshadow the reality of how you've been treated. And that moment, if you're not grounded, can pull you straight back into a cycle you worked so hard to break free from. When he contacts you out of nowhere, your mind instantly asks, what does this mean? But the better question is, what does his past behavior already tell me? His message didn't erase the times he left you hanging. His hey didn't suddenly transform him into someone consistent, communicative, and ready. His reappearance doesn't automatically equal sincerity. Sometimes it only equals boredom, convenience, or curiosity. Your instincts know this, they always did. The problem is that we are conditioned to doubt them. You're taught to be understanding, to give chances, to see the best. You're told not to be dramatic, not to be too much, not to jump to conclusions. So you suppress the part of you that has always known the truth. But instincts are not irrational. They're based on patterns, on lived experiences, on emotional memory. They are wisdom wrapped in feeling. You have the right to pause. You have the right to assess. You have the right to ask yourself what you truly want, not just what his message temporarily makes you feel. Too many women make the mistake of responding immediately because they're afraid that waiting, even for a few minutes, might make them lose the opportunity. But here's what you rarely hear. If responding too quickly is the difference between him staying or leaving, he is not a man worth holding on to. Anyone who wants a real place in your life isn't scared off by your calm, thoughtful pace. What matters most is not the speed of your reply, but the strength of your mindset when you reply. You must enter that conversation from a place of self-respect, not emotional hunger. You must be rooted in what you deserve, not in the fear of losing someone who was never fully present. Your instincts want to protect you from repeating the past. They want to remind you of the times you waited, wondered, and worried. They want to remind you of the nights you stared at your screen, asking yourself why someone so capable of texting now couldn't text them. When he comes back, your emotions will want to run the show. They'll tell you maybe this time is different. They'll say maybe he realized what he lost. They'll feed you the highlight reel of your best moments together. But instincts don't care about highlight reels, they care about patterns. They notice how every time you get close, he pulls away. How every time you start to heal, he resurfaces. How every time you begin to choose yourself, he suddenly chooses to return. Your emotions romanticize, your instincts analyze. Instead of letting old feelings rush you back into a familiar story, take a breath. Ask yourself what you felt before he contacted you. Were you gaining peace? Were you regaining clarity? Were you finally seeing things as they were instead of how you wish they would be? His message didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened in the context of your entire emotional journey. And here's the truth. Sometimes his message is not a sign of change. It's a test of your growth. Not a test you take for him, but one you take for yourself. Will you fall for the same breadcrumb trail of attention? Or will you trust your instincts and honor the progress you've made? When he reaches out, you are allowed to be curious. You are allowed to care, but you are not obligated to forget the past just to entertain the present. You are not required to reward inconsistency with instant access. You are not here to be someone's emotional reboot whenever they feel lonely. Your instincts want you to choose peace over chaos, consistency over confusion, love over longing, alignment over attachment. They want you to stop mistaking his sudden interest for genuine intention. Anyone can reach out. Not everyone can show up. Anyone can say, "I miss you." Not everyone can prove it with action. Anyone can return. Not everyone can stay. The only way to avoid the mistake so many people make is to focus on the version of yourself you're becoming, not the version of him you've been hoping for. You've grown, you've learned, you've healed in ways that maybe even he didn't expect. And often that growth is exactly why he comes back, because he senses your energy shifting, because he can feel that you're no longer waiting, because something in you has changed, and he wants access to the version of you that worked so hard to move on. But access to you is a privilege, and privileges require consistency. So before you respond, check in with yourself. Ask, does this message align with what I deserve? Does this communication match the effort I need? Does this attention come from genuine intention or temporary emotion? And most importantly, do I trust what I felt before he reached out? Your instincts are not trying to scare you. They're trying to guide you. They're trying to keep you from losing yourself again in someone who only shows up when it suits them. They're trying to help you stay loyal to the future you want, not the past you miss. And the most powerful choice you can make is to respond from strength, not scarcity, from clarity, not confusion, from confidence, not craving. You do not owe anyone immediate access to your heart just because they rediscovered their phone. You owe yourself honesty. You owe yourself patience. You owe yourself protection. And you owe yourself the courage to trust the voice inside you that has always known what your heart deserved, even when you weren't ready to believe it. When he contacts you, don't make the mistake of abandoning your instincts. They are the compass that will keep you aligned, grounded, and free from repeating the cycles you've outgrown. Trust them. They are the truest guide you have. And when you trust that inner compass, you begin to navigate the moment with a strength he may not expect. Because the truth is, the version of you who once craved his attention is not the same version standing here now. You've lived through the doubt, the waiting, the emotional roller coasters. You've earned your clarity. You've earned your peace. And with that comes a deeper understanding of what you actually want and what you no longer have the patience to entertain. What most people don't understand is that instinct is not just a feeling. It's a collection of experiences your mind has stored and translated into emotional signals. When you feel that tiny tug of discomfort, that subtle hesitation, that momentary pause before responding, it's not fear. It's wisdom trying to protect you. It's the wiser part of you saying, slow down, look closely, don't fall for the same illusion twice. Because the mistake so many make is confusing contact with commitment. They think his message is a promise. They treat it like evidence of change. They assume reaching out means he's ready to show up consistently. But contact is not commitment. A phone in his hand does not equal emotional maturity in his heart. Your instincts know the difference. They've seen the cycle. They've felt the pattern. They remember the last conversation that went nowhere, the last promise that fizzled out, the last moment you were left hanging. And while your emotions cling to the hope of possibility, your instincts cling to the truth of history. This is why taking a moment before responding is one of the most powerful acts of self-respect you can practice. That pause is where your clarity gathers. That pause is where your standards breathe. That pause is where you remind yourself of everything you deserve. You're not delaying to punish him. You're pausing to protect you. Because here's what happens when you respond impulsively. You hand him emotional access he hasn't earned. You instantly communicate, your timing controls me. You give him the power to disrupt your healing, your progress, your sense of stability. But when you respond thoughtfully, intentional, and from a place of inner strength, you send a very different message. One that says, my life doesn't revolve around your inconsistency. And that message is not arrogance. It's self-worth. Your instincts try to guide you toward that worth. They try to remind you that attention is cheap, but effort is expensive. They try to remind you that a man's ability to reach out says nothing about his ability to stay. They try to remind you that you've gone through too much growth to let a simple text pull you backward. So instead of getting swept up in the excitement of the moment, ask yourself what version of you he's trying to reconnect with. Is he hoping to reach the you who used to respond instantly, the you who used to compromise your boundaries, the you who used to let longing override logic, or is he prepared to meet the version of you who now carries standards, boundaries, structure, and self-respect? Because if he is only looking for the old you, then he is not prepared for the woman you've become. The woman you've become is more discerning. She doesn't confuse breadcrumbs with effort. She doesn't mistake temporary interest for lasting intention. She doesn't allow someone's sudden curiosity to override her long-term needs. She wants depth, not convenience. She wants consistency, not chaos. She wants a partnership, not a guessing game. Your instincts are trying to protect that version of you, but trusting them requires courage. It means being willing to disappoint someone who once mattered to you in order to not disappoint yourself again. It means being willing to risk losing him in order to preserve your peace. It means being willing to say, my needs matter, my growth matters, my heart matters, and that internal shift is what creates the most powerful reactions. When you begin operating from that energy, you stop chasing clarity from others and begin creating clarity within yourself. You stop looking for signs in his words and begin looking at patterns in his actions. You stop hoping he has changed and start asking whether the connection, even at its best, actually aligns with who you are now. That is what instinct wants to reveal, not whether he deserves another chance, but whether this opportunity aligns with your future. Because sometimes what you're hoping is a second chance is really a second trap. Not because he's a bad person, but because nothing has changed. And if nothing changes, the ending remains the same. Your instincts want to pull you away from that repetition. They want to remind you of the nights your heart hurt more than it felt held, the days when you questioned your value because someone else couldn't see it clearly, the moments when you settled for less because you desperately wanted more. They want to remind you of how hard you've worked to rebuild your confidence, your stability, your emotional strength. And they want to make sure you never trade that progress for temporary validation. When he reaches out, it is not a sign to rush back in. It's a moment to reflect, to observe, to get curious about his intention, to get honest about your own needs, to get clear on whether this connection genuinely serves the woman you're becoming. Because the you who is growing does not respond from fear. She responds from wisdom. She doesn't spring forward at the first sign of attention. She stands still and evaluates. She doesn't lower her standards, she raises her boundaries. She doesn't cling to the past, she listens to the future calling her forward. And if he genuinely wants to be a part of your life, he will rise to meet you. Not just with words, but with consistent actions. Not just with late-night messages, but with real intentional effort. Not just with promises, but with presence. But if he does, rise, your instincts will guide you in a different direction, toward people who are capable of meeting you where you are, not where you used to be. You are not the same person who once felt confused, anxious, or unsure. You are steadier now, stronger, softer in some ways, tougher in others. You have learned how to listen to yourself, and that is one of the greatest forms of emotional evolution. So let this moment be one where you step into that evolution fully. Let it be the moment where you choose truth over nostalgia, where you choose intention over impulse, where you choose self-respect over self-doubt. Let it be the moment where you learn to trust the internal voice that never lies to you. Because the more you trust your instincts, the less you will tolerate people who walk in and out of your life as if your heart has revolving doors. The more you trust your instincts, the faster you will recognize empty patterns disguised as romantic potential. The more you trust your instincts, the deeper your standards grow, and the easier it becomes to walk away from what doesn't serve you. And eventually, trusting your instincts won't feel like bravery. It will feel like home. And as that sense of inner alignment becomes familiar, something remarkable happens. You begin to attract only what matches it. You stop giving energy to mixed signals because mixed signals no longer stimulate you. You stop romanticizing inconsistency because consistency has become your new standard. You stop being pulled by the temporary highs of attention because the steady peace within you has finally become more valuable than the chaos someone else brings. This is the transformation your instincts have been preparing you for. They are not just trying to protect you from him, they are trying to guide you toward a completely new way of relating, loving, and choosing. They are trying to shift you out of old emotional habits that once kept you stuck. Habits like overthinking, anxious waiting, believing that a man's unpredictable behavior somehow determines your worth. They want to pull you into a mature, confident, grounded version of yourself who no longer negotiates her own value just to keep someone else comfortable. And when he reappears, his message becomes a moment of truth, not because of what he says, but because of who you are when you read it. You are no longer that woman who accepted confusion because she feared letting go. You're no longer that woman who tolerated inconsistency because she hoped he would one day realize her value. You're no longer that woman who tried to earn affection by being endlessly patient with someone who wasn't ready to give it. You've evolved, you've risen, you've grown into someone who deserves clarity, commitment, and emotional presence. So when he contacts you again, it's not about him, it's about you. It's about how you handle it. It's about what you allow. It's about whether you lean forward or hold your ground. It's about whether you are drawn back into old wounds or guided forward by your new wisdom. Your instincts want you to choose differently this time. They want you to remember that not every reappearance deserves a response. Not every apology deserves restoration. Not every I miss you deserves another chance. Sometimes the only purpose of someone coming back is to show you how far you've come. And the more you trust that truth, the more power you reclaim. You reclaim the power to say, I'm not available for anything that disrupts my peace. You reclaim the power to say, I won't be an option to someone who wants me only when it's convenient. You reclaim the power to say, if you want a place in my life, your actions will have to speak louder than your timing. You reclaim the power to say, I don't respond to confusion anymore. Because here's the real secret. People who return after disappearing often expect to find you exactly where they left you. They expect to find the same emotional access, the same softness, the same availability, the same willingness to overlook their inconsistencies. They expect the same door to be unlocked. What they don't expect is for you to have changed the locks. They don't expect you to have boundaries. They don't expect you to respond with calm neutrality instead of excitement. They don't expect you to protect your energy instead of pouring it out. They don't expect you to evaluate their intention instead of assuming it. They don't expect the strength you've built in their absence. This is why trusting your instincts is so important, because when you do, you step into interactions with a power that cannot be manipulated or shaken. You stop being emotionally reactive. You start being emotionally intelligent. You stop giving out second chances by default. You start giving out access based on consistency. You stop being impressed by words. You start paying attention to patterns. And patterns tell you everything. Patterns reveal whether his return is a genuine shift or just another loop in the cycle. Patterns reveal whether he's stepping up or simply circling back out of habit. Patterns reveal whether he's motivated by a desire to build something meaningful or just trying to get back the comfort he used to have with you. Your instincts read these patterns long before your emotions do. They sense the truth under the surface. They tell you when something feels rushed, pressured, or unbalanced. They tell you when someone's energy feels unstable. They tell you when something is missing, even if his words sound perfect. They tell you when your heart must take a back seat and your wisdom must key the wheel. So when your phone lights up and you see his name again, ask yourself what your instincts are saying, not what you wish they were saying. Ask yourself whether this contact aligns with your growth. Ask yourself whether responding brings you closer to the future you want or pulls you back into a past you've outgrown. Ask yourself whether you feel peace or whether you feel that old familiar anxiety stirring inside you. Peace is your answer. Anxiety is also your answer. One tells you this aligns, the other tells you this is a warning. Your instincts speak through the quality of your emotional response. They speak through the energy in your body. They speak through the calm or the chaos you feel the moment his name appears. They speak through the subtle signals you often overlook because you're too busy trying to make sense of his behavior. But you don't need to decode his behavior. You need to decode your own internal truth. Your internal truth will always tell you whether his return is a blessing or a lesson. It will tell you whether he's meant to be in your future or whether he's just resurfacing so you can finally close the door with your head held high. It will tell you whether to step forward or whether to stay firmly rooted where you are. And once you start honoring that internal truth, your life changes. You stop settling. You stop chasing. You stop replaying old emotional stories. You stop allowing someone else's inconsistency to dictate your self-esteem. You stop assuming that love is something you must earn. You stop confusing longing with connection. You stop seeing his return as fate and start seeing it as feedback. Feedback about your growth, feedback about your standards, feedback about the new version of you that no longer bends just to keep someone close. And the moment you fully trust your instincts, a shift happens inside you. That cannot be undone. You begin to carry yourself differently. You speak differently. You respond differently. You demand differently. You connect differently. You date differently. You love differently. You walk away differently, not because you're cold, not because you're bitter, not because you're guarded, but because you finally understand that your heart deserves to be met with intention, not convenience, that your presence is valuable, that your time matters, that your love is a gift, not a gamble, that your instincts are there to guide you to relationships that feed your soul, not drain it. And in that new space of self-trust, you realize something powerful. You don't need someone to come back to feel worthy. You don't need their validation to feel chosen. You don't need their message to feel desired. You don't need their attention to feel important. Because the moment you start trusting yourself, you become the one who chooses, not the one who waits to be chosen.